These days, the popular Brazilian steakhouse Fogo de Chão can be found in major cities across the world. But what was it really like to eat at the first ever Fogo de Chão? The first Fogo de Chão opened in 1979 in Porto Alegre, the capital city of the southernmost state in Brazil, Rio Grande do Sul. It was modeled off the region's culture, which was shaped by gauchos, the South American equivalent of cowboys. Gauchos roamed on horseback, herding cattle throughout Uruguay, Argentina, and southern Brazil in the 18th and 19th centuries. People who live and operate farms in these areas still proudly identify with this ancestry and call themselves gauchos. The original Fogo de Chão was not only a celebration of the way the gauchos cooked meat over an open flame, but also of their style of hospitality and dress. The Fogo chefs at the first restaurant were trained in the traditional gaucho manner, while the waitstaff dressed in traditional loose-fitting pants called bombacha, with wide belts and red bandanas around their necks. Waiters at many Fogo establishments throughout the world still wear these uniforms today. Ari and Jair Coser founded the restaurant with Jorge and Alaishu Ongorato. Both sets of brothers grew up on gaucho ranches just miles from each other, but didn't cross paths until they were all working as busboys 1,000 miles away in Rio de Janeiro. The Cosers received formal training in the gaucho style of barbecue, called churrasco, in São Paulo in the 1970s. That's where they honed their cooking skills and dreamed up the concept for Fogo de Chão.
My father, a gaucho chef like me, taught me how to cook. He would say, "This steak knows better than you how it should taste."
Ari Coser knew he wanted to open his own restaurant at the age of 14 when he was selling juice outside a São Paulo churrascaria. Determined to get a head start, he went out of his way to learn management skills from his superiors. As he told the Jornal da Gazeta, per our translation, "Every day, I was the last one out. I served beer to the restaurant owners at the end of the day and listened to everything they said. That's how I learned what it's like to manage a churrascaria." When he returned to Rio Grande do Sul, he went into business with his brother and the Ongoratos to purchase the building that became the first Fogo de Chão. The first Fogo was all about fostering the traditional style of churrasco. Since the restaurant was located at the epicenter of gaucho culture and the founders had grown up cooking in the traditional churrasco style, there was no skimping on authenticity. Many diners at the first restaurant in Porto Alegre would have associated churrasco with gatherings such as birthdays, weddings, and neighborhood get-togethers centered around an open fire as the meat slowly roasted over the flames. Traditionally, men would slaughter, salt, and roast the meat before delivering it to each table. Churrasco is most commonly made with beef due to the tradition of cattle ranching in southern Brazil, but it also includes a range of other meats such as sausage and chicken. Today, you can even order fish at some Fogo restaurants. The first establishment adopted the distinctive gaucho roasting method that combines open flames with charcoal, and the experience of dining there would no doubt have conjured happy memories for many of the local patrons who associated churrasco with joyful community gatherings. As challenging as it is to work in the restaurant industry, working on a ranch is harder. Speaking to the Dallas Morning News in 2011, Jair said that the first Fogo de Chão was a gamble that he was determined to win, recalling, "I didn't want to go back on the farm. I said, okay, the restaurant is hard, but there is worse." Ari left the family farm by age 12 to work on delivery trucks and went into the restaurant industry in São Paulo at the age of 14. Both Coser brothers were motivated to leave farming in the past and worked hard to earn enough money from their various restaurant jobs to open their own establishment. They poured their hearts and souls, and financial reserves, into the first Fogo de Chão, hoping it would be the means to escape the family business. Fogo de Chão is known for its upscale setting and decor, but the first restaurant was nothing more than a wooden structure with a straw roof. The building in Porto Alegre had been updated by the previous owners to function as a cafe, but the site was far from the fancy establishments with cavernous dining rooms that patrons of the steakhouse recognize today. Having worked for years from the ground up in the restaurant industry, Ari Coser was not in a position to purchase anything more lavish, which was, at least in part, why he turned to his brother and the Ongoratos to invest in the business. He even borrowed money from his father, who gave him his life savings and the warning that if he lost it, he shouldn't bother coming home.
My father often said, "You must love the flames before they kiss the steak."
What the first restaurant lacked in grandeur, it more than made up for in ambience and cuisine, and it wasn't long before the gamble paid off. After working in steakhouses in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro for years, the brothers were well-versed in cooking and waiting tables in addition to their business acumen. And this broad understanding was passed on to their employees. One of the rules of the first restaurant was that all staff members be trained in each area of service. Every week, employees switched stations, working as kitchen support staff, serving tables, and manning the cash register. This fostered a harmonious working environment and further deepened their connection to the tradition of gaucho hospitality in which cooks would serve food directly to patrons. These days, the gaucho chefs may not be washing dishes, but the restaurant estimates that they walk about 6 miles each night to deliver sizzling meat from the grill to the tables. The salad bars at modern Fogo de Chão restaurants are legendary, but the first restaurant was all about barbecued meat, grilled to perfection. Traditional gaucho gatherings would often feature side dishes made by women and children, but Fogo focused on the meat from day one. And while you might think that the spread would at least include a little barbecue sauce on the side, traditional churrasco is rarely seasoned with anything other than salt.
It's an all-you-can-experience restaurant. You get to try everything that we would have in the south of Brazil.
According to Chef Ivandro Caranhato, culinary director for the rival churrascaria chain Texas de Brazil and author of Churrasco, Grilling the Brazilian Way, the unique appeal of Brazilian steakhouses is their variety and simplicity. On the one hand, you can sample multiple types of meat in one sitting, while on the other, the salt-only seasoning appeals to diners with picky palates. The first Fogo de Chão leaned into the purest form of churrasco. From the beginning, the founders chose to model the restaurant on the rodizio, or making the rounds style of churrasco, in which waitstaff ferry skewers directly from the grill to the dining room. They stop at each table to offer the particular cut of meat to patrons. If the diner doesn't like what they see, they need only wait for the next waiter to pass with a different type of meat. The history of rodizio is murky, but one of the most popular accounts tells of a server in the 1930s who brought a churrasco order to the wrong guest. Far from being irritated, the guests sampled the meat and decided they liked it. Rodizio is all about variety and instant gratification. Diners aren't forced to choose one item off of a menu. They can sample whatever they see. The founders of Fogo de Chão opted for this method, meaning that none of the guests in the first restaurant picked their meats off of a menu. Instead, like many Fogo diners today, they decided whether a cut of meat looked tasty as the server approached their table. These days, some Fogo restaurants offer appetizers and entrees in addition to their all-you-can-eat option, but at the first establishment, there was a single all-inclusive price. Rodizios had been a popular form of churrasco in southern Brazil since at least the 1930s, but you can thank truck drivers for paving the way for the first Fogo de Chão, at least indirectly. In the mid-20th century, the Brazilian government began pouring money into its infrastructure in what the president dubbed 50 years in 5, referring to what he hoped would be 5 decades of progress within 5 years. Part of this push involved a rapid expansion of the highway system. Truckers began ferrying goods from one part of the country to the other, and inevitably needed places to eat. Rodizios were the perfect solution for busy drivers who wanted something quick and affordable to fill their stomachs without having to wait for a made-to-order meal. The traditional rodizio style of dining was far from the upscale experience that patrons of today's Fogo de Chão have come to expect. Due to their popularity as roadside food for truckers, these were usually humble establishments. Some were little more than a fire pit with a few tables scattered around. There were many rodizios before Fogo de Chão, but the Coceiros and Angaratos found their niche by turning the traditionally rustic, informal rodizio dining experience into a high-end night out that was more than just a pit stop for hungry travelers. In addition to dressing the serving staff in former gaucho uniforms with the bombacha trousers, wide belts, and red bandanas, every part of the experience was made to feel upscale. Instead of a few picnic tables around a fire pit, the dining room was opulent and organized. This exclusive atmosphere wouldn't have been financially accessible for average Brazilians who relied on churrasco, and rodizio in particular, for its no-frills affordability, but it proved to be a winning innovation for the founders of Fogo de Chão. Local diners quickly learned that Fogo de Chão was no average roadside rodizio. Word spread that the churrascaria was something special, and it soon became a hotspot for local politicians and celebrities alongside wealthy residents of Porto Alegre. This was quite a boon for a restaurant that was nothing more than a humble wooden structure serving a style of food usually thought of as a quick, affordable meal. Beef was one of the cheapest forms of sustenance in southern Brazil thanks to its robust cattle farming industry. It was no easy feat to turn churrasco into a meal diners would splurge on. The first Fogo helped change the face of beef and churrasco for southern Brazilians, but its celebrity appeal didn't stop there. When the Fogo team opened a second restaurant in Sao Paulo, one of its biggest fans was former President George H.W. Bush, who encouraged the owners to expand into the U.S. Today, Fogo de Chão is a chain with more than 60 locations across the world.
It all starts with fire. And then, out of the kitchen comes something that moves your mouth to tears of joy.
But the first restaurant had plenty of time to establish itself as a unique and exclusive dining experience. For 8 years, it remained a source of pride for Porto Alegre and drew guests from out of the state. It wasn't until 1987 that the brothers opened a second establishment in Sao Paulo, the fine dining capital of Brazil. The expansion was a testament to the success of the first Fogo in altering the way churrasco was perceived. Originally a staple meal for cattle farmers and then truck drivers, rodizio is not the kind of cuisine that you'd find in fine dining establishments in the regional city of Porto Alegre, let alone Sao Paulo, a city that heavily favored European gastronomy over Brazilian cuisine. It may have taken the Fogo founders 8 years to expand their empire, but when they did, they made a big impression. By the 1990s, they'd put down roots in the United States, which would eventually prove to be their largest market.